Do you want to know how to write a top quality conclusion for your next essay? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to write an excellent conclusion so that you can grow your marks at university. Let's get going right away. Here's the question that you've probably got. What's the difference between an introduction and a conclusion? When my students ask me that, I always tell them to go and look at my intro method and my 5 C's conclusion method. If you follow those two methods, you'll make sure that your introduction and your conclusion are both very good quality. The video before this one on our course on essay writing, it's a free online YouTube course, shows you how to write an introduction. In this video, I'm showing you how to write a conclusion with the 5 C's conclusion method. So, if you still got questions about introductions, I recommend going and having a look at that video. In this video, let's start talking about the 5 C's conclusion method right now. So here's the 5 C's conclusion method. Number 1, close the loop. Number 2, conclude. Number 3, clarify. Number 4, concern. And number 5, consequences. Now, we're going to talk about every one of those steps one by one and zoom in on how to exactly write each of those steps. For each step, you're probably going to want to write 1 or 2 sentences so you've got a nice, strong conclusion paragraph that might be, say, 7 sentences long. Okay, step 1, close the loop. Have you ever seen a comedian maybe on Netflix or on TV sometime, and he does a set of comedy where he starts with a joke and he also ends referring back to the same joke? In comedy, it's called a callback. In essay writing, you can do the exact same thing. We'll call it closing the loop. It's a nice way of tying everything together and ending by referring back to the start. So you could say in your conclusion, in the introduction of this piece, we talked about X, Y, and Z. And then in the conclusion, I'm going to refer back to that idea to conclude and sum everything up. So have a look at this example on the screen right now. It's a student who's talking about whether or not we should regulate Facebook. And they've talked in the introduction about Mark Zuckerberg. And they've referred back to that introduction conversation in the conclusion to say, in the introduction, this was mentioned. And in the conclusion, I'm going to refer back to that to close the loop and tie everything together now that we have a little bit more knowledge about the topic. It's a really nice, interesting way of closing off the whole essay and tying everything together neatly. So have a go at the close the loop method next time you write a conclusion. Another really nice thing about the close the loop method is it means you can start instead of with in conclusion, which is a very cliche way of starting a conclusion. You can start with in the introduction, this was mentioned, and now let's talk about it a little bit more with a little bit more depth of knowledge now that we've got a whole lot of knowledge from the body of the piece. Okay, before we move on to tip number 2, if you like that first tip, give us a like underneath to show your support for this channel. Okay, so tip number 2 is conclude. And of course, in a conclusion, you do need to conclude the essay. So let's focus on one specific sentence in the conclusion that actually concludes by saying, this is what my final position on the issue is. So to do this, you might want to use language like, the literature on this topic generally reinforces the idea that, and then follow on from there. Or another way you could do it is saying, recent studies make a compelling case that, and then finish your sentence that way. But in this conclusion, what you want to do is in one clear sentence, very clearly say, this is my position, and this position I have is as a result of the research that I've done for this essay. Okay, step number 3, clarify. Clarify how you have actually addressed the essay question. So many of my students submit really good essays, but they don't actually answer the exact essay question that I'm marking them on. So in the conclusion, it's really important that you actually show that you're directly addressing and answering the essay question. A good way of doing this is to actually paraphrase some of the language from the essay question. So let's say you've got a question on nursing and bedside manner for nurses. If the word bedside manner or the phrase bedside manner is used in the essay question, it's a good idea to use that phrase again in the conclusion and fit it into one of your sentences to show you're directly addressing the essay question through your language. If you want any more advice on paraphrasing, the next video for this free online course is actually on paraphrasing, so you can hit the link in the description to the playlist and you can hit the paraphrasing video and you can watch that straight away as well. Okay, step 4 is concern. Show who should be concerned about the topic. You need to show in your essay, well, now that I've shown you all this information, what should happen? Who should be paying attention to this issue? Oftentimes there's 2 main people who should be paying attention. The first one is policymakers and the second one is practitioners. So for policymakers, you'll often write an essay. So let's say an essay about whether or not we should have dogs in restaurants. If we have an essay on whether or not we should have dogs in restaurants, maybe the people who should be concerned about this issue are restaurant owners or policymakers. Maybe the people who are making the policy need to read your essay so that they can make a good, clear policy about whether or not dogs should be allowed in restaurants. And the second group of people who should be concerned are, of course, practitioners. So this is a nice, easy one, especially if you're doing a degree on nursing or teaching or something like that, because you can say, well, teachers should be concerned about this issue, or nurses should be concerned about this issue, or whoever it is who would be the practitioner who would need to know about the topic that you're writing about. So that concern sentence needs to say, now that we've got all this information, who should be paying attention to the issue? And you can see on the screen here an example of that from our example conclusion paragraph about letting dogs into restaurants. Okay, and step 5 is consequences. Now, steps 4 and 5 are very similar, so sometimes you can blend them together. But step 5, consequences, is what are the consequences of the topic? Now that we've done some research into it, what are the consequences for the everyday life of everyday people or for the world at large? So this sentence should send people back out into the world after they've finished your essay, because this is usually the last sentence for the paragraph saying, oh, I need to think about this a little bit more because it has consequences for the world. So you can see here in this example of the student who's writing a conclusion about whether or not we should let dogs into restaurants, they've clearly said, well, the good consequences of perhaps letting dogs in restaurants or having clearer laws about that is that it would be really helpful for blind people. So they've concluded by saying these are the consequences of the issue that we've talked about. As I said, you can often blend the concern and consequences bits together, so have a play around and see whether or not you need to do both of them or just one of the concern and consequences sections. And that's it for our 5C's conclusion method. Close the loop, conclude, clarify, show concern, and show the consequences. As I said, you can have a play around with that and maybe just use 3 or 4 or 5 of those different elements of a strong conclusion. So make sure that your conclusion is something that you're comfortable with writing, but use these 5 steps as a guideline for knowing what you need to write about in a conclusion. I'd love to see you comment in the comments section below if you really did like this 5C's conclusions method or if you've even used it for your essay. It'd be really nice to get a bit of feedback from you.
Hey guys, Chris here from essayguidance.com. If you like that video, you're going to love our full online course. In fact, that video you just watched is part of our full course, which is available on our website right now. You get tons more lessons just like this, plus in-depth tutorials that take you through exactly how to write excellent top-notch essays for university. So head over to essayguidance.com/course right now to check out what we have available for you.